And in the next moment, he seemed to hear a crisp crack, followed by the wild dispersion and reintegration of that heat stream, merging into a milky white airflow. The original winding stream instantly turned into a small river, flowing gently. Wherever it passed, the scorching pain had disappeared, leaving only a comforting warmth. Success. Ecstasy descended once again. Tang San was all too familiar with that sense of fragmentation. It was clearly the feeling of breaking through the first bottleneck of the mysterious heaven skill. The fusion of internal power and soul ring power became a stronger force, rapidly revolving around his meridians in a short time before slowly flowing into his dantian. As Tang San had suspected, upon arriving in this world, his mysterious heaven skill had inadvertently formed a strange compatibility with the soul power of a soul master. Each level of the mysterious heaven skill corresponded to a title of a soul master. With this first soul ring, he had finally broken through the first bottleneck of the mysterious heaven skill. Of course, his current strength was by no means as simple as advancing to the second level of the mysterious heaven skill. He now possessed the martial soul power that Tang Sect did not have, along with the skills brought by the first soul ring. The refreshing feeling brought by absorbing the soul ring was indescribable. It felt as if he were floating on a cloud, unburdened by any force, yet reaching the pinnacle of bliss. Every pore of his body opened greedily, breathing in the wonderful air. The transformation was so profound that Tang San's body seemed to undergo a miraculous change. Tang San tried to calm the excitement in his heart. The breakthrough of the mysterious heaven skill, with the help of the soul ring, indicated the direction of his future development. He knew that, regardless of anything, his life in this world would forever be intertwined with martial souls. Soul power was internal power, and internal power was soul power. He was destined to embark on the path of a soul master. Of course, he belonged to the soul masters of the Tang Sect. As Tang San slowly opened his eyes, the sky was already bright, and the vitality brought by the new day seemed to beckon his body. Looking down at himself, he found that his body seemed to have undergone some changes due to obtaining the soul ring. His originally slender figure seemed to have grown taller, his shoulders broader, and his skin had gained a layer of lustrous luster. Every movement was filled with a lightness full of strength, and he knew without testing that not only had he broken through the bottleneck of internal power, but the functions of his body had also been greatly improved under the influence of the 100-year manifold snake's soul ring. Teacher. Coming to his senses, Tang San's first thought was of his master. He was eager to tell his master that his theory of martial soul mimicry had succeeded. Throughout the fusion process, although he endured considerable pain, there was no feeling of conflict. When his gaze found his master, he couldn't help but be shocked. His master lay on the ground, his body seemingly stiff, motionless. Around him and his master, a circle was drawn with sulfur powder, just like the situation at the campsite before. Teacher, what happened to you? Tang San was extremely anxious and quickly rolled over to his master's side, lifting his body up. Seeing his master's face, Tang San blurted out, "Poison." Black gas surrounded his master's originally stiff face, and his whole person seemed to have more air than intake, less than output, his body stiff, having lost all feeling. How did teacher get poisoned? With doubts, Tang San suddenly felt that his master's body was abnormal and quickly pulled up the sleeve of his right arm, only to see that his master's right arm had swollen to 3 times its normal size. The skin had turned bright purple from being stretched. Fortunately, a cloth bandage was tightly tied at the root of the upper arm, obviously the emergency treatment his master had done after realizing he was poisoned. Nevertheless, in most cases, he remained unconscious, indicating how dominant the poison was. With a flash of insight, Tang San suddenly understood the reason for his master's poisoning. Previously, when he and his master were being chased by the manifold snake, his master's martial soul, the Lua San Pao, had been bitten by the manifold snake, right on the foreleg. It had been quickly retracted by his master at the time. Beast martial souls were one with their hosts. Even if his master's beast martial soul was a mutation, it was the same. When a martial soul was poisoned, it was equivalent to the host being poisoned. But his master had single-mindedly helped him absorb the soul ring, ignoring his own safety. When he entered the cultivation state, his soul power couldn't suppress the toxins, leading to the onset of the poison. Relatively speaking, martial souls had an advantage in this aspect. When a martial soul was contaminated with toxins, it wouldn't affect the host itself. Fortunately, teachers stopped the spread of the toxins. Otherwise, I would be helpless too. Tang San breathed a sigh of relief after checking his master's left wrist pulse. The poison had not yet attacked the heart, and there was still time to save him. Coming from the Tang sect, Tang San was clear about how to handle poisoning. At this moment, he was not concerned about whether the fire would attract soul beasts. He quickly gathered some dry twigs and leaves from the surroundings, lit a fire with a fire starter, then tore off the sleeve of his master's right arm, dug a pit in the ground with the sword his master had given him, and washed it clean with the water he had brought out. Taking a deep breath, Tang San flipped his wrist and, in 3 consecutive strokes, slashed at his master's pulse, elbow, and armpit. Immediately, 3 streams of purple-black blood, accompanied by a strong stench and a faint tea fragrance, shot out like 3 small rivers, flowing into the pre-dug pit. Tang San placed one hand on the master's chest, activating the newly elevated internal power of the mysterious heaven skill. His left hand quickly tapped, sealing off the 4 meridians at the master's chest position to prevent the poison from spreading. At the same time, his right hand began to gently massage the master's chest, using internal power to stimulate the circulation of qi and blood within the master's body, gradually forcing the toxins to a specific location. As the highest internal skill of the Tang sect, the mysterious heaven skill naturally had strong detoxifying properties. It wasn't forceful internal power, but rather extremely delicate, penetrating deep into the master's body like threads, ensuring not to leave behind any potential harm. Undoing the master's upper garment, Tang San carefully observed the black gas on the master's body. Under the influence of the mysterious heaven skill, the black gas gradually gathered together and flowed towards the direction of the master's right arm. At this point, Tang San still hadn't removed the cloth strip from the master's arm. As the poisoned blood flowed out, the master's swollen arm gradually returned to its normal size, and the color of the skin gradually normalized. The master's face showed signs of pain, and he began to groan. As the purple-black blood gradually drained away, replaced by fresh red blood, the master's arm also became somewhat pale. Only then did Tang San untie the cloth strip from the master's arm, using internal power to swiftly expel the remaining toxins all at once, then quickly sealing the blood vessels on the master's arm and tearing off several strips of cloth from his own clothes to bandage the wound. The reason he hadn't rushed to remove the cloth strip from the master's arm earlier was because he was afraid the master would lose too much blood, especially considering how long he had been poisoned. With the toxins completely expelled, Tang San was already sweating profusely. Although the mysterious heaven skill had entered the 2nd level, it was still not particularly powerful, and using internal power to assist in detoxification was the most exhausting in terms of both energy and effort. Moreover, the sense of power brought by absorbing the soul ring had also weakened somewhat at this point. Tang San washed the master's arm clean with clean water, then buried the small pit filled with poisoned blood with soil. Only then did he consider the work complete. Next, the master remained unconscious for 3 full days. During this time, he continuously ran a fever, and Tang San could only feed him some water every day. In order to replenish the master's body with some nutrients, He even cut down a tree trunk to make a small pot and cooked some meat soup with the dried meat he had brought. Being in the spirit-hunting forest, Tang San dared not venture far from the master. Fortunately, their luck was not bad. Although there were occasional soul beasts passing through, most of them were 10-year soul beasts, and their aggressiveness wasn't strong enough to cause any trouble for Tang San. What's wrong with me? When the master woke up, it was already noon on the 4th day. With his weak body unable to exert any strength, the master only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and the feeling of dizziness made it difficult for him to find his bearings. Even raising his hand required a lot of effort. "Teacher, you're awake." Tang San was surprised as he approached the master, transmitting a pure internal force into the master's body. With the help of the mysterious heaven skill, the master's spirit was somewhat lifted, and his eyes gradually began to focus. "Little San, am I still alive?" The master looked somewhat surprised at Tang San beside him. Tang San nodded and said, "Teacher, you're doing well. But this time, I'm afraid you'll need to rest for a long time." The master struggled to turn his head and looked at his right arm. "You saved me, didn't you?" Tang San scratched his head and said, "My father taught me a simple method for dealing with poison when I was young. When I saw you unconscious, I could only try. There's always a chance. It's better to try something than to do nothing." "It's nothing much. Does it look like I'm a horse?" The master forced out a smile. Of course, his already stiff face, combined with the current pallor, made this smile even more unsightly than tears. Being alive is always a wonderful thing, even for a master who has devoted his entire life to the study of martial souls. Tang Sen chuckled and said, "Teacher, you should rest for a while. I'll get you some hot soup. You're awake now, so rest for a few more hours before you can eat some dry rations. We should leave the spirit-hunting forest as soon as possible. The environment here is too poor, and the air is relatively humid, which isn't conducive to the recovery of your wound." Suddenly, the master seemed to remember something. "Little Sand, did you succeed?" For him, his research theory was even more important than life itself. Tang San smiled and said, "Teacher, rest assured. I succeeded. Look." As he spoke, Tang San raised his right hand, and a faint white light appeared on the surface of his skin. Immediately following, deep blue silver grass rushed out from the palm of his hand. A distinct yellow halo rose from under his feet, swirling around his body. It was the prominent characteristic of a soul master with one soul ring. Previously, the blue-silver grass was less than half a finger in width, but now it had widened to 3 fingers, and the leaves were several times thicker than before, with strange patterns on them. Dozens of blue-silver grasses quickly spread out in all directions from his palm, with their leaf tips raised, resembling more than 10 manifold snakes searching for food. There was no scent of the manifold snake on the blue-silver grass, only a faint tea fragrance, but the intoxicating aroma was filled with danger. The master's eyes sparkled with extreme excitement, and he suppressed his excitement, asking, "How's its toughness?" Seeing is believing, and Tang San answered the master with action. One of the more than 10 blue-silver grasses that had left his palm suddenly flew up, entwining around a small tree with a trunk as thick as an arm. On the other side, it returned to Tang San's hand. He exerted force with his right hand, and the trunk of the small tree immediately bent down, stretching the blue-silver grass taut, yet showing no signs of breaking. "Good, this is great. It seems my judgment was completely correct." After injecting the manifold snake soul ring, the blue-silver grass has become tougher. If I'm not mistaken, it should also carry a certain amount of the manifold snake's poison. However, what's its current skill? After obtaining the soul ring, the abilities of martial souls must undergo a process of mutation before they can be produced. The skills produced by different martial souls with the same soul ring are absolutely different, and vice versa. Even if the age of the soul ring is different, the skills will vary greatly. Therefore, although the master's research on martial souls is quite profound, he cannot be sure what effect Tang San obtained from this first soul ring. Tang San said, "Teacher, these few days I have tested with some weak 10-year soul beasts. What you said is correct. The blue-silver grass indeed inherits some toxicity from the mandala snake, but it does not have a lethal poisonous effect. Instead, it has a paralyzing effect from the mandala snake's poison. However, it must be directly contacted to take effect, and the toxicity is not very strong, but the restrictive effect is very obvious. The skill of blue-silver grass is entanglement. By controlling with soul power, it entangles the opponent's body, making it unable to move." As he spoke, Tang San used his soul power to control the blue-silver grass he released to display the skill. Suddenly, more than 10 deep blue grass leaves simultaneously rose from the grass, swiftly entwining around a thick tree trunk. The grass leaves spiraled out, covering an area of 10 square meters, making it impossible to dodge as long as it was within this range. In an instant, more than 10 blue-silver grass had tightly entangled the big tree. A hint of contemplation flashed in the master's eyes. Indeed, controlling is the characteristic of soul masters. If there is a powerful attacker cooperating with you, the effect of your martial soul will be more obvious. The so-called controlling type soul master is to control the opponent's actions as much as possible, and the effect of this entanglement skill is just that. It also has a paralyzing effect itself. Unless the enemy is in existence beyond 2 of your soul rings, it is impossible to break free from this entanglement skill. San, we succeeded. When it came to martial souls, the master didn't seem like a person who had been seriously injured at all. His eyes were bright, and his tone was inexplicably excited. The greatest feature of the entanglement skill of blue-silver grass is its suddenness. Tang San had tried it. Within a range of 50 meters, he could control the blue-silver grass to launch attacks from any position. It was unstoppable. Especially in a forest with numerous plants, the blue-silver grass had better concealment. Tang San cooked another pot of meat soup and fed the master some chopped dried meat that had been boiled until tender. With something in his stomach, the master's recovery speed also became faster, but they had to prepare to leave the soul-hunting forest because the food and water brought on this trip had been almost depleted in the past few days, even under Tang San's efforts to save. The master still did not have the ability to move, so Tang San carried him out of the soul-hunting forest. Due to the significant difference in their sizes, all the way, the master's legs were dragging on the ground. Relying on his extraordinary strength and internal power, Tang San, under the master's guidance, carried the master step by step out of the soul-hunting forest and returned to the Novice Soul Master Academy by carriage. Along the way, whether it was when Tang San was taking care of the master or during the process of carrying him out of the forest, the master never said a word of thanks. But the way he looked at Tang San seemed to be no longer just as a disciple who fulfilled his dream for him, but more like the emotions that should have appeared in Tang Hao's eyes. One day as a teacher, a lifelong father. These simple 8 words were deeply imprinted in the master's heart. After a few days of rest and Tang San's meticulous care, when they returned to the academy, the master could barely walk with Tang San's support. However, according to Tang San's estimate, the master's serious poisoning this time caused him significant damage, and it would take at least a month for him to fully recover. The master was only a guest at the Novice Soul Master Academy, and his relationship with the dean was good, but he had no relatives. During this period, Tang San naturally had to take responsibility for taking care of his teacher. He had already planned out how to take care of the master every day. At this moment, it was the time when the students were in class in the morning, and everything in the Novice Academy seemed very quiet. Tang San supported the master and went straight back to the master's room, letting him lie down on the bed. We're finally back, teacher. Now you can rest well. During this time, you must take good care of your injury and must not overwork. If there's anything you need, just tell me directly. The master nodded silently and said, I didn't expect to survive this time. My body's recovery doesn't matter, but your cultivation cannot be interrupted. At the same time, you have to do one thing. Sand, bring me the second book from the left in the third row of the left bookshelf. Okay. Following the master's instructions, Tang San brought over a thick book. What surprised him was that this book had no title. Without taking the book from his hand, the master said, This book records some of my research on cultivating soul power. Although soul power is cultivated by meditating to operate one's own soul power, there are many techniques involved. It details what kind of route is easier to improve one's strength, what kind of martial soul is most suitable for cultivation in what kind of environment, and so on. I can't personally guide you during this time, but you must not slack off. Yes, Tang San respectfully answered. Although he hadn't opened the book to read yet, he felt an inexplicable shock in his heart. After this breakthrough in soul rings, he also had a comprehensive understanding of martial souls. According to his understanding, this so-called soul power is actually a kind of internal power, but most people's cultivation methods are simply to operate them without any rules. Tang San possessed the cultivation method of Shantian Gong, which undoubtedly would result in a better cultivation speed in the future compared to most soul masters. And according to what the master said, the cultivation method he researched should be similar to the route of cultivating inner strength. To achieve this stage, how much effort did the master have to put in? It's worth noting that Shantian Gong was the result of countless predecessors' painstaking experience in the Tang sect. Yet the master had done it alone. Also, you should go to the Martial Soul Hall in the city of Norlin now. You can easily find the location of the Martial Soul Hall on the way. It's in the central area of the city. There, you should undergo a soul master evaluation. One is to test your own soul power situation, and the other is to officially register at the Martial Soul Hall, so you can receive monthly subsidies in the future. You don't have to continue working as a part-time worker. Tang San carefully placed the book given to him by the master into the 24 Bridges Bright Moon Night. The 24 Bridges Bright Moon Night seemed to be made of some material with extremely flexible elasticity. When shrunk to its smallest, it could barely fit around Tang San's waist, even with his young body size. But when extended, even a big man with a waist circumference of over 4 feet could wear it, and the width of the belt remained unchanged. At this time, Tang San was wearing the uniform of the Novice Soul Master Academy of Norland, with the belt given to him by the master around his waist. The whole person's spirit and demeanor were completely different from when he first arrived at the academy. As the saying goes, clothes make the man. Although he couldn't be described as handsome, he looked clean and gave off a refreshing feeling. Teacher, you should rest for a while. I'll go now. I'll bring you food back at noon. Coming out of the master's room, Tang San happened to hear the bell ringing after class. The class time at the Novice Soul Master Academy was not long, and there was still half an hour of break time after class before the cafeteria opened for lunch. Just after class ended, Tang San decided to go back to the dormitory to greet his roommates and tell them that he would be back after going out. However, when he returned to the dormitory, he was surprised to find that the whole dormitory was empty, with no one inside. His bedding was still the same as when he left, with his and Xiao Wu's bedding together, separated by a parcel. No one came back after class? Tang San couldn't help but feel puzzled. Turning around, he walked out of the dormitory and came to the playground. On the other side of the teaching building, the students who came out last were coming towards the dormitory in 2s and 3s. Just as Tang San was preparing to go to the Martial Soul Hall, as instructed by the master to undergo Soul Master certification, he vaguely heard those students who were a few grades above him mention the words part-time worker while conversing. Hastily focusing his mind, Tang Sand listened to their conversation by using his inner strength to discern their positions. These part-time workers are really overestimating themselves, actually challenging 6th grade Xiaolao. I guess we won't see the part-time workers in class tomorrow. You can't say that. The part-time workers dare to challenge our school's little tyrant with some basis. It is said that a new first-year student has joined the part-time workers, a girl, very powerful. All the part-time workers call her senior sister Xiao Wu. This incident seems to have been initiated by her. Their bet is quite extreme this time. If Xiao Lao wins, all the part-time workers will be his pets in the future. If the part-time workers win, then senior sister Xiao Wu will become the senior sister of our whole academy. These part-time workers are definitely asking for trouble. How powerful can a first-year girl be? Xiao Lao is one of the few 6th grade students in our academy who has reached the level of Soul Master. It seems that Xiao Lao will have a group of followers again in the future. Listening to the conversation of the two senior students, Tang San's heart tightened suddenly. Although he had not spent much time with Xiao Wu, he still had some understanding of her personality. This seemingly tender girl was by no means as gentle as she appeared. Instead, she was a bit fierce. Combined with what Wang Sheng had said to him before about part-time workers being bullied, he could be sure that what the two senior students said was true. Tang San was also a member of the part-time workers. Naturally, he couldn't just watch his roommate being bullied. Seniors, may I ask where Xiao Lao and those part-time workers are? Tang San approached the two students who were talking. The two students were obviously taken aback. The taller one on the left said, "What are you doing? Junior, do you also want to intervene? Xiao Lao has enough people. Judging by your appearance, you should be a 2nd or 3rd-year student. I advise you not to go. It's not good to get injured." From Tang San's neat appearance and the quality-looking belt around his waist, these two students obviously couldn't guess his identity as a part-time worker. "Senior, I just want to take a look from afar." Tang San naturally wouldn't reveal that he was a part-time worker. They should be dueling in the woods behind the academy. With accurate information, Tang San dashed off towards the direction behind the academy. The so-called back mountain of the academy was not inside the Norland Academy, but rather a small hill outside the back gate of the academy. Besides the academy, Tang San saw no one around and immediately began using Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, running madly towards the mountain. The forest was quiet, but it didn't mean peace. Instead, there was a tense atmosphere. Except for Tang San, all the part-time workers stood behind Xiao Wu. Facing them were more than 20 senior students from various grades. At the forefront, a person was wearing the uniform of the Norland Novice Soul Master Academy, tall and straight. Although still somewhat childish, he already had a bit of an adult look. He seemed to be at least half a body taller than Xiao Wu, and his appearance could be considered handsome. However, the contemptuous and disdainful expression on his face destroyed the harmony. "Little girl, it's not too late to regret now. Of course, I don't mind having another pet rabbit. Your martial soul is a rabbit, right?" Xiao Wu's expression was no less disdainful than the other parties, still wearing a contemptuous look. However, her disdain, combined with her pink and tender face, somehow made her look a bit adorable. She pointed at the other person and said, "Xiao Lao, are you scared? If you're scared, you can become my little brother in the future." "Haha." Xiao Lao laughed ostentatiously. "Am I afraid? Let me tell you, Wang Sheng, are you part-time workers all out of your minds, actually bringing such a little girl to challenge me? It's ridiculous. Little girl, have you even bothered to find out who I, Xiao Lao, am? Inside Norland City, even if I walk sideways, no one dares to stop me, let alone in the academy." Xiao Wu was visibly impatient now. "Stop the nonsense and let's get started. You tell me, how do you want to fight?" Xiao Lao's eyes flickered, showing a bit of mischief. "Rest assured, I won't bully you guys. Since you have 10 people here, We'll also send out 10 people. We'll take turns, and whoever wins can continue to fight the next opponent until all the members of one side are defeated. Being the leader among the students, Xiao Lao was not reckless. On the contrary, he was very clever. Although Xiao Wu didn't seem threatening on the surface, Xiao Lao had beaten Wang Sheng multiple times before. He understood Wang Sheng's character well. If this little girl in front of him didn't have some ability, how could Wang Sheng easily acknowledge her as the representative of the part-time workers? Even if this girl were strong, so what? His side was all senior students, and each one was strong. On the side of the part-time workers, there was only one Wang Sheng who was somewhat capable, plus this little girl, who was just 2 people. Letting his brothers wear them down completely, and even without him having to make a move, this battle would already be won. Does the seemingly fair duel method really fair? Wang Sheng naturally also saw Xiao Lao's plan, but before he could speak, Xiao Wu had already readily agreed. All right, that's settled then. Come on, who's your first contestant? Come out. At this point, Wang Sheng couldn't stop Xiao Wu from agreeing anymore. Xiao Lao motioned to his men behind him, and a tall senior student immediately stepped forward. Wang Sheng gritted his teeth. Senior sister Xiao Wu, let me go first. He naturally recognized this senior student. This guy was in the same class as him, and Wang Sheng had fought him many times before, each time ending up quite miserably. This student's martial soul was a stick. But it wasn't just any stick. Xiao Wu nodded in a big sisterly manner and agreed to Wang Sheng's request. Wang Sheng took a deep breath and stepped forward to the front of the 2 groups. Lu Long, come. A yellow light lit up in Lu Long's hand, and a long stick over 2 meters long instantly appeared in his grasp. You defeated underling. Wang Sheng, if I don't leave you lying down for several days today, my surname isn't Lu. Before Wang Sheng could respond, Xiao Wu, who was behind him, smiled and said, then if you lose, you can be called crippled flower broken willow from now on. Lu Long's expression turned cold, but he didn't say anything. Stepping forward quickly, he swung the long stick in his hand straight at Wang Sheng. Wang Sheng's body also lit up with soul power, letting out a roar. Without dodging, he crossed his arms to meet the opponent's long stick head-on. With a dull sound, Wang Sheng grunted and took 2 steps back, his arms full of soul power suddenly recoiling, reaching out to grab the opponent's long stick. Despite the protection of soul power, just this initial contact had already left a blood mark on his arms. Bruises were inevitable. Lu Long sneered, you still haven't learned your lesson. This is my martial soul. With a flash of light, the end of the long stick caught by Wang Sheng suddenly disappeared, and then the tip of the stick pointed forward, piercing through Wang Sheng's arm and hitting him in the chest, throwing his body backward. Wang Sheng's fighting spirit was undeniable, and his strength was obviously superior to his opponent's. But his disadvantage lay in not having acquired soul rings yet, unable to undergo soul fusion. Although his strength greatly increased with the help of soul power, his agility was not enough. Facing an opponent who used a long stick martial soul, he was unable to fight back, being taken advantage of by the opponent's inch-by-inch advantage. Springing up, his roar echoed again, but soon, his body was thrown out again by the long stick. However, Wang Sheng was also tough-skinned and thick-fleshed. With so many times of being beaten, his ability to resist attacks was much stronger than that of ordinary students. Although he was completely at a disadvantage, it wasn't easy for the opponent to make him lose his fighting ability. Before Xiao Wu and Tang San came to Norland Academy, all the part-time workers relied on him alone for protection. Without any ability, they would have been bullied to death long ago. Wang Sheng is still too impulsive. In a head-on confrontation, he can't get close. And only when he gets close can he have a chance to defeat the opponent. While Xiao Wu was frowning and watching, a low voice suddenly sounded in her ear. When she turned her head, She couldn't help but show a look of surprise in her beautiful eyes. San, you're back. Standing beside Xiao Wu was Tang San. Crossing the back mountain of the academy, he saw the scene in the woods. Without making a sound, he quietly came to Xiao Wu's side. He wasn't tall, and even the people on Xiao Lao's side hadn't noticed his appearance. Tang San looked at Xiao Wu, wanting to say something but hesitated. Seeing his hesitant expression, Xiao Wu said, "What's up? Want to say I'm impulsive again?" Tang San shook his head. We part-time workers can't always be bullied by others. This method of dueling with the leader of the students is considered a permanent solution. You did the right thing. However, you should have waited for me to come back before challenging them. This way, the chances of success are greater.